Now let's start looking at some of our games, of our model games. These are not necessarily always, the best games that were available, or the most high quality games, or the games by the strongest players. I just chose some that, they just sort of show the most typical ideas and how things can work out for us mainly. Also, to motivate you on your journey, but also to give you the knowledge of the most typical patterns that you might encounter, after the opening is over, right? Because the opening is just the beginning of the game. This one is the game by Magnus Carlsen. It's a Blitz game. It's an official, a tournament Blitz game. Magnus Carlsen was black. And in this position, he played knight bd7, which is not our main move. Yeah, we after bishop g7, this position is part of our repertoire. But the game does not have to be our repertoire to give us what we need to learn from it, because the ideas are similar throughout different lines. Magnus played knight bd7. It's a blitz game, yeah. So we don't really have to judge the opening correctness of the choice, right? It seems to me knight bd7 is a slightly imprecise move. White could go e5 here, immediately attacking this knight, and also creating some possibilities of e6. The knight on d7 is sometimes misplaced in these positions. Black probably tried or hoped to go knight g4. And here the simple line bishop d2 takes h3 seems to be profitable for white. Because mainly I think ed doesn't work, right? Ed takes, looks like trouble. I mean, this rook is hanging, the pawn on h7. White is much better developed. Black should not open the position. e4 is probably the better move. We have many times throughout this course encountered this particular trick of going e4 so as to keep the things more closed. And here after ag takes, it seems to me that black is in some trouble here. Yeah? White is very well developed and is ready to castle, and black should probably be accurate not to get, mated quickly here. Maybe knight b6 followed by bishop e6, something like this. But in general, white should be doing very well here. So we go back. White played bishop d3. The white player was a very strong player from Mongolia, Grandmaster Sumia Bilgun. I know him from the Asian tournaments. I've played against him and encountered him a few times at Asian games and Asian championships. He's a very solid player, very tough to beat. Bishop g7, h3, e5. So this particular setup we know also from our course. Yeah, this is what we do very often. We also try to have our pawn on b5 whenever possible. So white took. And usually in many similar positions we have been taking with a knight. But here black is actually well positioned to fight for the c5 square. So he takes with the pawn. The idea is to go queen e7, knight c5. c5 is a good square if you can get to it. Yeah, the bishop on d3 is a bit misplaced because prevents the queen d6, the dangerous queen d6. White play queen d2, queen e7, and castled long. So basically, yeah, this this castling long is probably unfortunate. The king on c1 is often in trouble. Essentially, black's play is on the queen side anyway. No matter where the white king is, knight c5, b5 is part of the black's plan. And now that the king is on the same side, this plan will be so much more efficient, right? Because if you can make good positional moves, but they also create an attack, this is so much better. And Magnus played knight c5. And now basically white has to take care of defending. White's pieces are more passive than they look. For instance, these pieces, they don't do very much. They just defend this pawn. That's all. And white has problems with any activity, and he tried bishop h6, but this actually makes it worse. I mean, the bishop on g7. We love this bishop, but it's not the most active piece black has at the moment, and exchanging it only weakens the dark squares. Because after castles, takes. This square and this square, they are potentially weaker in white's camp, and black did not have to sacrifice anything for that. But very difficult to play, especially in a blitz game if you don't know what your plan is, and very difficult to find a plan here with white. And basically white sort of panicked. Played h4. This does weaken the g4 square, and there is no attack. There is, like, after bishop g4, there is really no attack. We have encountered this particular bishop before. In one of our theoretical chapters, it does this dual job, right, of controlling h5 and threatening bishop f3, ruining white's pawns. Queen e3, b5. We know this expansion, right? There's nothing to explain here. Black's pawns, they start rolling. King b1, a5, knight e2, a4, threatening a3 at times, to play for checkmate. And basically, it's an interesting scene, right? There is material equality, and white doesn't even have like really grave positional problems. Just the king on b1, and all the pieces completely useless, right? It adds up. And somehow white didn't do anything so crazy. White didn't do anything so obviously wrong, and yet white's position is already beyond repair. So this is, a very frequent picture of what happens when white does not know exactly what they are doing against the peers. And it's also typical for Magnus Carlsen, who usually just makes it look very easy, right? I mean, like, he made normal moves, and 16 moves into the game with black is already completely winning against the grandmaster. White played knight h2, bishop takes e2, and here white played bishop e2 there. It was not necessary. Queen e2, a3 is also like really disgusting for white. b3, rook fd8, and black will either double on the d file or at some point play knight a4. One way or the other, black will win this game. So in the game, he took with the bishop, and after a3, useful to weaken the c3 square first. b3, knight takes c, e4. Turned out that knight d5 is a threat. White was probably counting on bishop f3, and knight d5 is basically already it, right? I mean, white played rook d5 cd, but we don't have to see the rest of the game. It was basically agony. So this is also what I mentioned a few times during the course and during the introduction, and I will mention it again. If you are keen to learn, if learning is what you want, then you can basically learn from anything. And any grandmaster encounter, even a blitz game, will give you enough food for thought, right? And this is a blitz game, and yet there were so many things typical for the whole opening that were on display here. So I think it's very sort of gratifying and very useful to just take any grandmaster game played under any conditions, get the board and play through the moves and give it some thought. Every grandmaster game will give you ways to improve your chess. So proceed with our model games. Our next one is the game, a correspondence game played between very good correspondence players. I will probably make a mistake pronouncing their names, but white was Yenin and black was Szymanski. I have encountered their games every now and then when going through some lines, and they played a very sort of instructive game in the Peers, in one of the very main lines that we have in the course. they started as a modern. Very often, modern and Pirc, they transpose into each other. And basically, after move 9, we were most definitely in our course. Bishop c4, b5, bishop b3. So here, this position, we have it, and we gave it some, some thought in our course, me and you together. And our main move was knight bd7, right? And knight g5, rook f8, we sort of gave this pawn, sacrificed it. a5, and that's why I referred that more on it in our model games, because okay, I mean this it's a simplified course. It shouldn't get too theory heavy, right? And in a pawn down position, just proving in every line that black has compensation felt a bit pointless, right? Black does have excellent compensation. Now let's look at some possible lines, right? We are threatening a4, catching the bishop on b3, and white has to react somehow, right? Most reactions, they include moving this pawn, so one way or the other. a4 is more active and also more tactically tricky, because now black has some interesting things going on. Like for instance, queen g5 could be very confusing, threatening to harass the white queen with knight f6. And this pawn on a4 might work for white or against white in some lines. So I think the immediate threat is knight f6, queen g7, knight h5, where black has at least a draw. And white can try h4, trying to kick this queen from g5 in order to be able to castle. Queen g2, castles long, b4, knight b1, bishop a6, something like this. I mean, it looks like an absolute mess to me. White queen is deep in the enemy camp, and the same is true for the black queen. And after knight c5 or castles long, it's a mess. Yeah, it looks like it could be very promising for black, given that I assume that we are going to be better prepared than our opponents most of the time. But we can also just go b4 in this position. Knight b1. I mean, usually positionally this should be good for white, pawn up and everything, but black is so much better developed. And this bishop on b3 is about the only piece which is developed. The queen on h7 is more of a nuisance than an asset, and everything else is on the starting positions. Bishop a6, useful to control the squares on this diagonal, including c4, which is a vital square positionally, and also f1, so that white cannot castle. Knight d2, castles long, and then I think black has a really strong position here for a small deficit, right? White's pieces are clumsy, and black just wants to double on the d file, and all black pieces they seem to be stronger than the white colleagues, counterparts, whatever the good word is here. And after, let's just rewind a bit. So this was white playing a4. White can also play a3. I'm not sure what exactly changes here after queen g5. But knight c5 basically transposes to our model game, so maybe we can stick to this. I think it's easier. And here, basically queen g5 remains sort of an annoying possibility, essentially cutting the white queen out. So queen h6 is prudent, is a safe continuation to prevent queen g5 and also make sure that the white queen can return. And this basically transposes to our model game. So to avoid any confusion, let me return a few moves where we diverged. So knight bd7 was our main move in the theoretical section, and in this particular game, black played knight a6. So don't be confused; it will lead to the same position. The knight is en route to c5, and well, there are two ways to go from b8 to c5 after all. So knight g5, rook f8, takes, knight c5, and basically they got the same position which we did, and white is pawn up, and black is super active, and I claimed sufficient and easy compensation in our chapters, and I just want to show how this compensation worked out in this correspondence game. So takes is necessary. Now this knight is looking at some like really powerful squares, and now white has to wait a bit with castling. So white played queen e3 in the game. Castles long basically looks a bit suicidal, right? Why would you castle into the attack here? But also castling short knight d4. I mean, this knight on d4 is a monster, just such a powerful piece, and this knight on c3 is basically anything but. So black castles long and then plays rook h8 and basically starts a decisive attack on the king side, right? Black might even have some tactical tricks with knight e2 check and rook h2 at some point. So anyway, this looks like a massive attack. So white played queen e3. Luckily for white, it's a correspondence game, so well, these people had the time to make the decisions, if nothing else. And the point is that now if black plays knight d4, white is in time to go rook c1 and then to play knight e2, exchanging this knight. So basically white is in fact defending accurately despite being a pawn up. So black castled, threatening a lot of things. Once again, rook h8, knight f4, queen g5 is an attack if white castles. So I played queen b6, basically creating threats such as queen c6 or queen a6 check, and forcing black to do something about it and to exchange queens. So queen c7 takes, and we got into an ending where black has so much positional potential for a mere pawn that I think for any practical purposes, black is, well, I think better, not worse. White played rook d1. I pushed b4. Other plans are possible throughout. So takes, knight e2. And I think I would probably be tempted to go c5, to play c4, knight c5, king c6, and to just push. White is a pawn now, but white is just so much more passive that I think this could easily turn into a one-sided encounter over the board. And I think white, confidently held it because it's a correspondence game. So knight c5, f3, b3. It's basically immaculate play by both sides, and everything ended, in a well-deserved draw. And I have the feeling that white is the one defending here. And even at the very end, black got the d4 square for the knight. And here they agreed to a draw. I have a feeling that still, if black played rook b3 and then f5, attacking this knight potentially, black actually is still exerting a lot of pressure on the white's position. And of course, in correspondence chess, it's like an open secret that, people are stronger when they have resources and time. But over the board, I would definitely take black. I would think that, black's task is just easier and more pleasant, and we should not be too impressed by white's extra pawn on h2. And I hope you are not too concerned about being pawned down. I don't think it plays a big part in this particular line. So we're moving on with our model games. This is Leko Ivanchuk, a rapid game from back in the day, 2004. 2004 is the year I won my FIDE World Championship, but again, different story, completely unrelated, but good memories. So this is the position, something similar, if not exactly this, we had in our theoretical chapters as well. And basically the plan, black's plan, includes e5, right? I mean, we try to get both e5 and b5, but we don't have to do this immediately. Black could make some useful moves here, like queen c7 is one, bishop b7 is another. But again, he played e5, nothing wrong with that. D takes e5, and now we can see, in a sort of a real world example, some of the things that we spoke about during our theoretical chapters. In these positions, it's usually advantageous for black to exchange these knights, because the knight on d7 can potentially be a bit passive, a bit in the way. Also here, this is a stronger recapture, giving the bishop some air. And if the c5 square will need covering, then we can do bishop e6, knight d7 if necessary. So this is sort of a better way to play for black. This is a positional mistake, a bit surprisingly. It allows, for instance, a4. And once white plays a4, b4, knight e2. In this particular position, black is a bit weakened, yeah, and white has some initiative. So this was one way to play. Leko played knight e2, which is also a good way to play. a6, a4 is very thematic. White is not allowing black c5 and c4. So black would like to straighten out the structure on the queen side. a4 keeps this structure for now, make it red, keeps it fixed. So bishop b7, knight g3, very useful to defend this pawn against possible c5 ideas. Queen e7, and basically here's a very interesting moment. So Peter, he played, with white, he played this really well so far, but now he missed an interesting tactical trick, I'm sure, because otherwise he would have played it. And because he missed a tactical trick, he made a positional mistake. It happens sometimes. When tactics don't work out for you, you sort of play something else and you miss the threat. So white should have played c4 here, which is really strong. And I was trying to think, why he wouldn't do this, and it turns out, it seems to me that what he must have missed is, after black somehow reacts, for instance, b takes a4, white has this beautiful positional trick with a tactical nuance, right? This pawn kills the black pieces on the queen side, and we cannot take on c5 because queen b4 wins material. So this was basically a small piece of tactic, but it had some effect on the game, because not happy about c4, I guess, because he missed a trick with c5. White lost the threat, played bishop h6, and this is a positional mistake. Yeah, this exchange is good for black because there are a lot of dark squares which this bishop was covering. And we also know this mistake from the game Bilgun-Carlsen. So this is sort of can happen in a lot of different positions. So black played rook e, takes, and now black is completely fine. So white no longer has any advantage. Black, is well placed, and after queen g5, knight f5 threat can look scary, but we can always just move back. It's not a big deal. And now, okay, white played b4, which is again not bad. I mean, there was some normal looking moves. After all, it's a rapid game, so I don't want to to go into too much detail. These players also didn't have so much time. A, B, C, B. And already, it seems like black's position is maybe a bit more compact, a bit stronger, a bit less weakened. White has to take care of the b4 pawn in the long run, and maybe just defending it with rook e b1 and waiting for a better chance would be prudent. And in a rapid game, it's not so surprising that having lost the threat, Peter Leko, he somehow started missing things, allowed rook d4, and very soon black was completely dominant in this game. So here white has some chances to still stay in the game, but it would require some real brilliance, like bishop f1 with the idea rook b4, c4. And maybe white has enough compensation, but this is already, I mean, you can probably tell, this is a computer generated resource. And white in the game was already, I guess, panicking. And very soon they reached a sort of a beautiful picture where black was so dominant, like you rarely see in a grandmaster game, and that it came from the peers, made it even more instructive for us, right? I would always like to look at games of Ivanchuk and how he can be positionally dominant. That it happens in our opening is even more instructive. And okay, black converted this also beautifully. At some point, he was just so winning, and white's position was so helpless that that you could really just feel with him. And essentially, if this can happen to Peter Leko, then it can happen to your tomorrow's opponent, absolutely. And back then in 2004, I made an example. Not an example. Why would I say I made an example? I did not make an example of this game. I made a mental note of this game, and this mental note said, this is a case, an example. Maybe that's why I said example. This is the example of the peers going terribly wrong for white positionally. And now pretty much exactly 21 years later, I got this mental note out of, some far recesses of my brain, and it has become a part of this course. I hope, to your satisfaction. Now I'd like to show you the game, which is not only interesting for our opening, but also historically, because this was played in a World Championship match by Bobby Fischer with black against Spassky. And at the time when he needed to stay solid with black to win the match, he introduced a lot of new openings for himself. Earlier, he played the Alekhine. Now he played the Pirc. And in a way, it's, of course, a testimonial to his faith that he had in this opening. And in this game, he played g6, but okay, they came to the same position. He already played more or less the modern theory of this line. Also, you probably remember mentioned this game in the introduction, and this is also our theory. Fischer also played bishop g4 at once in order to avoid h3, making the bishop passive on c8, right? So bishop g4, just like it's suggested in our course. Rook d1, knight c6, and somewhere around here they deviated from our course and the main theory. And Spassky played bishop c4. So activating the rook, activating the bishop, and setting also a trap. It was not obvious to me. So I asked the computer, queen b4, because it looked to me like black is attacking a lot of pawns. And it turns out that after a3 takes knight a4, this queen is actually trapped. This queen is out of moves, and knight d4, black can still try this final bit of tactic, but queen d3, turns out nothing is changed. The queen is trapped and lost. And maybe this line should have been, not difficult for me, but I will confess this particular part of chess, trapping the queen, has always been difficult for me. And whenever, I have my queen up there somewhere, I think my queen will get trapped. And whenever my opponent has a queen somewhere in my camp, I never seem to be able to trap it. So this is like a weakness with me. But what to do, nobody is perfect. So this is the story of queen b4. And in the game, Fischer played knight h5. And yes, Spassky played bishop b3. And I think some people have suggested rook d5, trying to attack. But in reality, after queen c7, it turns out that rook g5, although it looks scary, allows knight d4, and white doesn't get the attack and gets problems, because also the rook on g5, honestly, is not always amazingly placed. So this daring approach maybe does not really lead to any attack, and white's move in the game, bishop b3, was normal. And now Fischer, he sort of showed the modern understanding of it, which in pre-Fischer times, like 10 years before that, would nobody would do this in a world championship match, but he just took bishop c3. This is a more modern, like respecting material kind of approach. And in fact, it turns out that sacrificing, well, I'll say sacrificing is rubbish. Exchanging this bishop on g7 doesn't weaken the black's position as much as for instance, I would have thought. Black is very, very solid, and there is no good way for white to exploit this. Spassky played f5. This is one way of trying to take advantage of the fact that the bishop is gone from g7, but it also weakens some squares. Very important. Now the square e5 is superbly weak in white's camp, and that's also the pawn on e4. Make it red. So knight f6, and basically now black is just ready to give the exchange at any moment. For instance, if white had played bishop h6, knight e5 simply takes, and black is just absolutely amazing. And white has a passive bishop, the spin is annoying, but also black's position is just so strong, and the rook's so useless. This must be around here that Fischer basically thought that, I'll sacrifice the exchange, because very soon it happened. White played h3, takes, and now black could do a lot of things. Like, for instance, queen e5 was a possible move, attacking this pawn, and also taking some important squares from the white queen. So queen e5 was a possibility. Knight e5, on the other hand, was natural and wrong. The destiny of this knight is to kill this bishop. That is basically, that's the case. And the knight on e5 looks pretty, but the bishop is still alive. And this bishop will become very strong. So white's attack is not to be underestimated here. And Fischer, he started by exchanging the dangerous bishop, like knight a5, rook d3, queen c7, bishop h6. And now, Spassky could have hoped that by tactical means he will somehow keep the bishops, but Fischer, he just took here. And turned out white cannot yet take the rook, because after knight c5, everything is hanging. Like the bishop is hanging, the pawn is hanging, the rook is hanging. Black ends up with more material. Spassky took cb. Okay, black is still pawn up, right? We remember black took this pawn on c3, still a pawn up. And now, interestingly, Fischer just did not try to save this rook on f8. It was the end of the World Championship match, the final phases, and basically every solid draw brought Fischer closer to the World Championship title. You have a check, and then he just, basically, as they like to say in old days, he showed some understanding. He played queen e5, basically saying that in the resulting kind of a fight, these rooks will not be very effective. Bishop f8, rook f8, and basically he turned out to be right. He has a pawn for the exchange and a massive square on e5. And basically a pawn for the exchange and positional advantage is always enough, or almost always enough, against the rook. And basically white never managed to get any activity in this game. And I mean, these rooks, they do not do anything. They need open files, but the only open file in the position is firmly occupied by black. Spassky tried to exchange the queens. And now, for instance, black could go d5, trying to play this position, but in fact, he just sort of firmly believed in the solidity of his position, and he was just, he turned out completely right. Yeah, white still made some moves, but never close to anything. Yeah, and after they got to 40 moves and a bit, the game ended in a draw. I like this game because it's just so confident and so calm. And I know this might not sound like much, but in the final stages of a World Championship match, everything is different. And playing a steady game with black, just calm and efficient and safe in a surprising opening, this is a very, very decent achievement, very good achievement. I've been through quite some World Championship matches myself, also as a second, really, mainly, and it's not a given that you stay this stable. Yeah, so this is an impressive thing, and good for us that it happened in the opening that we are studying. Now we proceed with our model games. The game I would like to show you is the game between Grandmasters Nan and Sairavan from the year of 1989. This was to some extent the golden days of the periods, because a lot of new ideas were discovered. One of those things that was discovered is the viability of this system, and we still enjoy it 36 years later. It's also around the time when I started to play tournament chess, so yeah, been a while. Anyway, the theory is absolutely up to date. This is also part of our course, so these guys, they really worked out some details. And queen takes g4 is one of those moves where I said, they're not really amazing, and you can see this in a model game. So now this is your chance. Bishop c4 defends this pawn. b3, bishop takes d4. I guess that both players, they were still in some sort of opening preparation, although back then people still did not use computers in chess. I mean, computers already existed, but in 89, a good computer would still occupy a big building, yeah? And couldn't really use it for chess purposes. Different days. So bishop d2, bishop d5. The fact that both players, they were in prep, suggests to me that maybe this position was more difficult to evaluate back then than it seems now, because white must have believed that this is a promising area to explore. White played castles long. Knight e6 I thought was a better move, but this is a computer supported piece of analysis that wouldn't be obvious around here. White is 2 pawns down, but to my computer it still seems that white has a decent amount of compensation. The d4, you could also say black is 2 pawns up and white is hard pressed to prove it, which is also, I think, would be true if you leave out the computer out of the equation, right? Anyway, in the game, this did not happen, and Grandmaster Nan, or Dr. Nan as he is more commonly referred to, castled long, knight c6, and well, we should not forget, first of all, black is 2 pawns up currently, and also has this really powerful center pawn mass in the center, right? And when white's threats will come to nothing, as they will, play queen e6, queen c8, all this is very high quality chess. King d7, black is ready to run with the king. And after queen d5, queen g8 just, basically catches the white queen, or at least makes white lose precious time retreating it. And now black is still a central pawn up, and Grandmaster Nan decided to pull the emergency brake and win back the pawn. Took here. The idea is that if black takes rook ag8, then knight f7 traps this rook, so takes, and white got back the pawn, but the remaining pawns are of a completely different quality. Black has this mass of pawns in the center, and also very mobile pawn mass on the queen side. And essentially, Black is basically positionally winning. He started very nicely. He started rolling the pawns. This is correct. Knight g5. He played b4, which is maybe sophisticated. There was nothing wrong with a5, but b4 is also good. Rook he1, a5. He's basically just rolling these pawns to glory. And once the a file opens, then Black rooks will come in. Jan Timman once put it, and I remember being impressed by this description. He said, and the black rooks will enter, causing death and destruction. So this is Jan Timman for you. Very sort of proper quote here. Yeah? The black rooks will enter, causing death and destruction. And basically, Black did everything correctly. And around here, maybe started having second thoughts. This bishop is extremely powerful, much more powerful than the knight, that actually doesn't do quite as much as it would like to. And just removing the bishop to f6 and then playing a4 would have almost definitely crashed through. I don't know what exactly Yasser was worried about. Maybe he didn't want to give white a chance to go knight c5, dc, bishop b4, and pick up a pawn. But okay, Black's piece would be so much stronger than white's pawns, and I'm sure Black would have brought it home. Instead, he played a4, which is not exactly a mistake, but sort of the beginning of a mistake. White took knight d4, and here the decision was already difficult, like to take with a knight with a pawn. I understand why he was not impressed by this, but in fact the Black's pawns are really very powerful in the center. And I generated a few lines with the computer. So king b1, rook a5 is very important. The rook is very active here, both to go to h5 and to double on the a file. Bishop c1. Now white is ready to meet the doubling by going bishop b2 to protect the a1 square. And now the following gorgeous line is given by a computer. So rook h5 first, activate and cause some weakening. h3, a3, very important to wall the white bishop in, and also the king, and then to push the pawns in the center. Bishop d2, rook e8, and it turns out that Black has a winning advantage here positionally. I'm not trying to say Black made a mistake in the game. It's just from the computer's point of view, almost everything we do, at some point qualifies as a mistake. And this is, of course, not at all obvious for a human being over the board. He played knight takes d4, bishop b4, and I don't know if he missed something or underestimated something, but this rook ending is already not an advantage for Black anymore, and the game ended in a draw. To rewind a bit, Black played a very powerful game until here, and I think just playing bishop f6 and then a4 would have been enough to win this game. So this is, I think, the real mistake, right, from a human perspective. And keeping this bishop and realizing how powerful this bishop is would, I think, really have clinched the game. And even, as it is, the game gave us a lot of insight into the nature of these endings from the Austrian attack, where Black has this massive pawn majority in the center that is also very mobile. Yeah, these pawns are really, really very strong, and when we play these positions, we have to have this bit of knowledge and this bit of faith in these pawns. Now I would like to show you a piece of analysis that went into preparing this course. It's not a game, it's not a model game in itself, but I think it will be very interesting to see what sort of work went into this, and that when I tell you that this line works, or this line is good for Black, this line works, that there is some work behind it. It's not just a claim. So one of the most important theoretically heavy parts of our repertoire in this course is the bishop e3 line. And one of the lines came to this position. And in the course, I promised that I would, give you some more details in case you feel you need more detail to play this line. So I would like to take this opportunity to show you some of this details, some of this analysis. And one of the moves here is bishop g7 and f4. This is the point behind taking on g7. The only point is to be able to play f4. Otherwise, white would be just having problems after castles e5. This is not what white wants. This is the exact opposite. So f4 is necessary, knight d7, and now I analyzed various things. So for instance, this tempting move, e4, knight d1, knight df6, really just leads to a complete mess. And I know this king looks funny here on the open file, but it's just going to h8 soon. So knight e3 takes king h8, and this king is actually now much safer than white's and much safer than it looks, of course. Basically leads to an open fight where I hope that the safe nature of the king on h8 will at some point weigh more than an unusual pawn structure that looks a bit weakened for black. So it looks like a mess. Mess is a good thing for black. And the other line here is castle slow. Queen a5, threatening b4, king b1, e5. There are also some lines behind this. So this looks like a mess. And here the computer says white has to go knight b5. So yeah, I mean, let's keep it real. Nobody is going to do this with white. After d takes e5, d takes e5, if white wins a pawn or takes a pawn, on b5, knight b6, white will end up some material up, but at a positional cost, because this pawn and the square is going to be really strong for black. So takes knight c4. Now white has some choice where to go with the queen. Queen d3, knight takes b2. At some point began to look really risky for white. This I think you will win with black very easily. Knight d5 is more prudent. Queen b4, b3 takes. And at the end, it seemed to me that, white is pawn up. This is a fact. But also white has no healthy pawns. And that too is a fact. And with this monster knight on f4 and the rooks joining in, I think black has easily enough compensation. And, I mean, slightest mistake by white and white will end up in some, positional nightmare here. So this worked for white. This was the story of bishop takes g7. I went through this a bit quickly, but I'm just showing you my analysis, right? It's not a theoretical chapter where we just go move by move. I'm just sort of giving you a look inside, also as to some extent a justification for some of the evaluations that I made in our theoretical part, and also to fulfill a promise, right? I did tell you I would show you some of the analysis that went into this, and the analysis like this sort of went into this course, although most of the time they remain behind the scenes, because if I were to show you the entire work, I know you might be curious, and I know you might like to get the work in its entirety, but then, once again, it would be a 400 hours course and not as simplified at all. It would just basically take all of my time and your time to sort of publish a course like this and to watch it. So that's why we kept it as simple as possible to make it also doable and digestible for both of us, me and you. So knight e2 is our main line. Queen b6, this is sort of the new approach that I suggest. Castles long, knight d7, and rook dg1 c5 was where we, I think, broke off in our theoretical chapter. So basically some lines here. Knight g3, I think does not have the independent value because leads to the same as the main line. Computer suggests knight c3, which is a bit weird. I mean, white did just play knight e2 a bit earlier, right? So here went knight e2. To go knight c3 now would be a bit strange, although highly sophisticated, threatening knight d5. And now a lot of moves are possible. c4, I think, is playable. cd was also playable because it seems that white has to go into the ending here. The endings are traditionally good for black here. And also after knight c3, queen a5, preventing knight d5, also seemed promising for black. Turned out the white's idea is to take the pawn. I don't really believe in these pawns here. Seems to me that black will, have a very strong attack here, and black, I think, will turn out to be a stronger side in this position. So we go back. White's main computer try takes knight g3. This is also the one that requires black to show sort of the finesse behind this whole line. So rook g3, c4. White has to go bishop e2. Well, has to, I think. Bishop f1, I didn't see the point of. So bishop e2, e5 is positionally desirable. Now black is attacking this pawn and is also prepared to tackle white's attack, and white needs to attack right now. h5, queen d4, queen g5, and around here we need some strong measures. So white is threatening ag with an attack. So h6 is necessary. And now white has different ways to attack the knight, which is necessary because otherwise black just closes with g5 and that's it, game over. So white needs to attack the knight. Queen f5, queen e7 is the same. And now we go g5. So this was sort of the tactical point behind this whole concept. We're already on move 20, and that's why this is not a part of our theoretical chapters, because at some point we would get too deep into theory and not the purpose of a simplified course. So now queen d7 just doesn't work. Queen f2, black is winning here, attacking two pieces. Rook g1 leads to a mess. So now white actually does not have much of an attack because black covers the f6 square, but white can return. And after king b1, black plays rook g8, very, very important, threatening queen takes g1. And this threat sort of takes the wind out of white's sails. Yeah, I'm feeling very poetic today, right? So anyway, white will no longer have any attack after that. And the main line is rook d1, queen takes f2, and this line is as difficult for white as it is for black. White needs to also be brilliant. Rook g5 turns out to sort of here, white turns out to have a decisive attack. And that's why we need to go king h8. And here also there is some branching. Rook gg1, rook a d8, queen d6, king h7. Turns out to be like really, really complicated. My computer said rook g6, queen e3, and then I had the feeling that white will probably lose this around here. This is a very difficult line to navigate. White has this problem on the back rank, the one that white really cannot seem to solve. And the last is this is the line rook f5, queen e3, king b1, queen e2, and white somehow survives this. And it ends with some draw where white's rook on f5 is strangely trapped, but also white's position is so solid that I cannot do anything. But black has a billion draws to choose from. This is one of them, and it ends with a perpetual check. So this is an insane piece of analysis. I'm sure this is what you'll think, and to some extent I sympathize, I understand, I agree. But very often a lot of grandmaster preparation hinges on some piece of analysis like this. And for most of you, I think this will be new, and I think maybe you were curious to sort of to look behind the Grandmaster preparation, and some similar work went into this course as well. And it is, with intent, with some purpose, that I do not go into this sort of detail in the theoretical part. The truth is, whilst it is good to know that your lines are backed up by computer preparation and that they are correct, and that the analysis has been made and things have been checked, it's a useful knowledge to have. But you do not need this whole analysis or all the analysis that grandmasters do every day to actually play the line. The actual amount of analysis required to play a game of chess can be minimal. You just you know ideas, you know where your pieces are going. This is more valuable than analysis, which is here in this position 32 moves long or 32 moves deep and has many branches. But I just wanted to show you this. Well, first of all, because I thought you might be curious to see some Grandmaster preparation in action, and also, to show you that there is some justification, there is some work behind the suggestions, right? So in case you need more details are that they exist, right? You can either, check the model games, check the chapters, or also do some of the work yourself if you feel that in any part of our course, which I think is very detailed as it is. If you need more depth, then it's always possible to get more depth, also on your own with an engine or with a friend or yourself. You can get more depth. But this is just an example, as promised, of some of the work that went behind the lines suggested in this course.